Hi everyone. Today I'm going to do a quick review or a quick overview of the prerequisite chapter, parts 6 through 9. We're just going to kind of page through the book like I did the last time for the first 5 sections. We're going to look at just some of the places I want you to kind of pay special attention to. I will come back with different videos for P6, Section 6, Section 7, and Section 8. Section 9 has a lot of different parts to it, and we will not see them directly in this course, so just kind of remind yourself that it's there, but as I'm paging through, I'll kind of mention that. So we're going to start with Section 6, and Section 6 is all about factoring. Some of you remember how to factor very well. Some of you might be a little bit rusty. So for those of you that are rusty, make sure you spend a little bit more time going through how to factor. They do a lot of factoring using trial and error. I will, in my video, when I go through and do some examples, remind us of another method that is taught in many courses. So some things just to kind of remember. We will come back to them. I do want to remind you of some special formulas, kind of to make sure that you bring them back. The difference of squares. So if you have an a squared minus a b squared, that does factor into a minus b and a plus b. We will do an example in my specific video. These two are your perfect squares. I do not usually memorize those. I just recognize that when it does happen that I have the same factor twice, I can rewrite it as something squared. And then we do have those wonderful sum and difference of cubes. So those are ones that students tend to forget a little bit. So bring those back to memory, or how to at least use them, so that we can go back and say, oh yes, there's the formulas, I remember them. If you have them committed to memory, it makes things a lot quicker when you're doing other problems that use them. So that's kind of what we're doing in Section 6. So just kind of page through that, and again, there's lots of practice in there for you. Chapter 7, or Section 7, I should say, is all about rational expressions, and these were the ones that students really did not like. So rational expressions are when we have polynomials over polynomials, and we want to simplify them. Okay, we have uglier ones when we have square roots in the bottom, so kind of be careful with some of those. We will be looking at how to simplify, how to add, how to subtract, how to multiply, and how to divide. I will go through some specific examples in my Section 7 video, but I wanted to kind of remind you that this section you may want to spend some time on. The key to this section a lot of times is factoring. So you need to be good at factoring to be able to deal with these rational expressions. I do go through some adding and some subtracting, multiplying and dividing. I am not going to remind you on how to rationalize. We will see this occasionally when it comes up. I'll remind us. But the key to rationalizing something a little bit more complicated is to multiply again by a really funny looking 1. And the funny looking one is that conjugate, which is the same thing with the opposite sign. Notice in red here, this is a form of 1. And when they multiplied, it is going to those inners and those outers. They are foiling. They aren't just taking the first and the last. They are foiling, but the inners and the outers are opposites in sign, so they will cancel out. And then reminding ourselves that the square root of 2 squared is simply 2. And then what they did is they ran this negative through the numerator to change the signs. So kind of be careful about that. All right, some things I do want to bring up is avoid some common errors. And these are things that students do just because it makes life easy. We have lots of things that we can do when we are multiplying or dividing. Okay, so we can distribute powers or exponents. We can break up square roots. We can take square roots of perfect squares, but only when we are multiplying and dividing. When we introduce adding, those properties no longer hold. So if you have a addition that's being squared, what you have to do is remember to FOIL it out. You can't just square the first and square the last. You have to remember that OI. So we have to FOIL it. We cannot just take the square roots of pieces when we are adding. So a lot of these things we can do with multiplying, we cannot do with adding, or subtracting for that matter. So we can't just add fractions by adding the denominators. We can't cancel the A's. Okay? Although students love to do this all the time. A to the negative first plus B to the negative first is not, you can't pull that exponent out. You can't bring it in, you can't pull it out like you can with multiplying. Okay, so things work nice when we're multiplying, not so nice when we're adding. All right, another problem that's in the text that kind of goes through that, and they show you some numbers too. So you can't just add those denominators. If you think about it, 1/2 plus 1/2, we all know is 1, but we don't get that 1 over 2 plus 2. So here again are some of those common ones. So you put numbers in and see. It does not work. There may be times where it does, but that would be just a, oh, it happened to work for us. Section 8 is all about solving some basic equations. And when we're in this section, we're going to stick to the linear equations, meaning we will only have single exponents. We will not have like x squares or x cubes unless there's very specific ones. We will hit some of those more difficult solving equations later on in this course. But in this section, we're just going to remind ourselves of some linear equations. And again, I'm going to walk through those specifically in a separate video so that we can actually walk through some examples. So that would be section 8. Section 9 is modeling with equations. And anytime you hear the word modeling, you should be thinking word problems. It's just another way of saying we're going to deal with word problems. Very similar to another nice word they like to use is applications. So anytime you hear the word applications, they're thinking word problems or real world situations. So in the real world, it's not about the equations, it's about the problems. And the problems come to us in word form. So we always ask ourselves questions in word form. And what a math person's job is to put those words into an equation so we can actually solve it. And in this section, it brings up some of the old nightmares you may have. We have some interest problems. We have word problems. We have lengths and areas and volumes. So you might want to remind yourself some of those properties. You know, perimeter is the distance around, what the circumference of a circle is, what the area of a square or a circle or a rectangle are. We have mixture problems, our work problems, and again, time, distance, and speed. I am not going to be testing you on any of these types. Just kind of remind yourself that, hey, there are word problems in there, and I might need to remind myself of some of those formulas that we used to use. Distance equals rate times time. So some of those might creep up later on as we go through the course. But again, this section, just kind of remind yourself that, oh yes, that modeling section was in section 9 of that prerequisite problem section. So maybe go back if we need to pick that up. So that's a quick overview of just those last couple sections in that prerequisite chapter. I will be doing some specific examples when I create videos for specifically the section 6 on your factoring, so I will do a couple factoring problems. I'm going to go into section 7, which is that rational expressions, so looking at some fractions, how to add and subtract when we have things in there. And then again in section 8, which is solving some equations, and I'll look at some specific examples there. So I'll have some of those videos listed separately in our same spot for this weekly folder. So see you in the next video.